Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I was going to wear my Tucker Carlson shirt, which I just had delivered to me.
Oh, you could do an unboxing. We could put it on YouTube and make $1 billion.
I could do that, but I'm wearing my Make Speech Free Again hat because Alan Tonelson was just taken down off Twitter.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a milder, more civil person?
Aside from you mean? No. Let me just interrupt and introduce us. I'm Robert Wright. This is the Wright Show, available on both streaming video and via audio podcast. You're Mickey Kaus, co-founder of Blogging Heads, Trump supporter, impeachment opponent. We'll get to that part. But Alan Tonelson. So we don't know what his offense was. I mean, Alan Tonelson, when I was acting editor of the New Republic,
Not hearing the leaf blower?
We hear it, but it's not, the leaf blower is not fatal. These mics are pretty good at killing background noise, especially when I'm talking. So,
okay, if it doesn't bother you, let's keep going.
It's suboptimal, but what are we going to do? I mean...
Well, wait for half an hour till he goes away.
Oh, wait, it just got... Okay, I should keep talking because...
Sorry?
I said I should keep talking because when I'm talking, you can't hear it at all. When I'm talking, it's like Zoom. So this is too much shop talk. Let's get back to the introduction part. So we're going to talk about impeachment and stuff, assuming the leaf blower doesn't blow us out. Although, Mickey, is there a reason you couldn't do this indoors? You know, that's some people. There are innovative thinkers, like people in Silicon Valley. If faced with this exact problem, they might think of that workaround. Like if there's a leaf blower in your background, don't tape the thing on your patio.
Well, I didn't know that the leaf blower was going to hit today.
Okay, but the knowledge has since entered your brain, right?
Correct. I could move inside if you want me to move inside.
I don't want to suggest anything radical, but if there's a leaf blower.
We're going to retape this intro, right? You're not going to go.
Well, I don't know. It's kind of entertaining in its own way.
But, I mean, it would take me as long to move inside as to wait for the leaf blower to go away.
Well, then let's don't do it. Let's continue.
Okay.
And which means this is all part of the actual show. I hope people have gotten their money's worth. Now, okay, Alan Tonelson, I found out from you on Twitter that he's been suspended from Twitter, which is
correct.
He is mild-mannered. Let's tell people who he is. When I was acting editor of the New Republic, he used to write these pieces, these economic nationalist pieces. He was the voice of economic nationalism, and now
he's just a wonky guy who is very interested in trade and is a nationalist populist, and he's one of the few people who will, with facts and figures, defend Trump's trade war with China, although not uncritically. And he's the most civil guy. He wrote a very civil, reasoned, the case against impeachment, which probably is what got him somehow banned, that it was totally, calm and decent arguments, no invective. He never does ad hominem. And somehow he's been suspended. And they won't tell him why. They'll say, in a few days, you'll probably be restored.
They won't tell him why?
Well, they'll tell him you violated our standards, but they won't explain which standard he violated.
Oh, that should be immediately available to people they suspend. I mean, they know it's in their computer.
I don't know what happens. I suspect somebody complains, so some social justice warrior complains, and then they take it down, and then in a few days they restore you and say, "Whoops, we're sorry." Meanwhile, you've missed out on the key window for influencing what people think about impeachment. So it's.
In terms of Twitter-related injustices, this ranks up there with my not being verified.
Well, Twitter, bizarrely, for a left-wing organization, has managed to create a completely inegalitarian universe, where these elite blue check marks, but also even without the blue check marks, the people they take down the little people. There are a lot of people who are too big to take down, who they won't take down.
Let's get back to the blue check marks. That's my grievance, because I never applied for verification because I didn't realize it mattered. I thought it was a vanity thing. And then I heard, well, no, there are people who have their feeds, and a lot of people, these high-powered Twitter people, set so that they only see the tweets of verified people, or they see them preferentially. So I thought, whoa, well, this is a competitive disadvantage. Well, by that time, Twitter had suspended the verification process. This is like a year or more ago, and they still haven't resumed it. They said they were going to study it and come up with some new plan, but of course they don't have their shit together enough to do that.
But some people, and if you try to apply for it, there's no way to do it.
That's what I'm saying. The whole process has been suspended. You
go to the website and you say, but there was a time when people, I think, when they tried to restart it or something, and there was an application. Anyway, there's no application.
But now there are loopholes. What's her name from the New Yorker? Her fan said, "Jack, please verify her," and he did.
No, she said, "Jack, please verify me."
Yeah, but then her fans chimed in, and they did.
Right, and there are other people there are people who have gotten it selectively, but it's like the Wizard of Oz. Nobody knows why they're rewarding some people with blue check marks and others. But my point is they've replicated the social environment of our evolution, which is you can mess with the peons, but you can mess with the big cheeses.
Actually, that's not the environment of our evolution. That's not. I mean, hunter-gatherer societies. Are many of them, I mean, they're the closest model we have to the actual social environment of our evolution, even though none of them are perfect models. But they are actually tend to have a relatively egalitarian ethos. You know, you share the food from the hunt. If somebody gets too big for the britches, you cut them down. The big hierarchies come into play with the invention of agriculture.
Okay. But I thought it's very Darwinian to be looking over your shoulder to see if there's somebody.
Well, status competition is definitely part of hunter-gatherer societies. Yeah. There's evidence that high-status males have more sex partners, and all of the stuff you would expect Darwinians to case. But
the high-status people, the rich get richer, as they often do in Darwinian dynamics, and people who have a lot of followers don't get taken down like Alan Tomlinson got taken down.
No, it's total bad news. I mean, they should just do away with the damn verification system, or make it, or do something.
These are two things. I don't think Alan Tomlinson is verified, and I think
I'll bet he was.
You claim that they don't take down verified users.
No, I'm not saying that at all. No, I'm saying. I mean, but I'm saying the verification thing is itself like. Not left wing. Yeah. It's like there's the elites and there's the peons, like you said.
And the other thing is, I'm faced with the East German dilemma, which is if I defend Tomlinson on Twitter, will Twitter then take me down too?
Oh, I don't think it's that bad.
Mickey, if they take down Tomlinson, they could take down anybody. It's like Mr. Rogers. It's like
Mickey,
they killed Mr. Rogers.
Do you want it to be said someday? First they came for Alan Tomlinson and Mickey said nothing.
I said something, but the question is, do I keep saying it?
If they take you down for saying this, I vow that I will either say something on Twitter or say something to a close friend, like a next door neighbor. I promise.
That's so brave of you, Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that, fortified with that, I know I can forge ahead.
Go to it, man.
You have my back.
To the barricades. No, it really is. It's so hard to imagine Alan Tomlinson saying something sufficiently offensive to warrant this, but you never know. You Trump supporters, is he an actual Trump supporter now?
I don't think so. I mean, he's Trump friendly. He defends his trade policies when he thinks they're working. He attacks it when he thinks he makes a mistake, but he's certainly friendlier than most other commentators. And he just wrote a long, long case against impeachment that was very good that I linked to.
Okay, let's get to that.
Okay.
So let me make my position clear. There's a sense in which I'm not pro-impeachment, which is just that I'm not sure it's politically smart for the Democrats, A, and B, I'm pretty sure it's not good for the country. But if the question is, did Trump do something that gives Congress legitimate grounds for impeachment, I think the answer is yes. And there we differ. You think he didn't?
I think high crimes and misdemeanors, it has to be something pretty bad to get rid of a president. And
I think this is bad.
I don't think this comes close. So why do you think it's bad? Why do you think it's a high crime?
Well, the way our system works is voters elect Congress and they elect the president. And the way legislation is supposed to happen and policy is supposed to get made is Congress passes legislation. The president, if the president signs it, it becomes law. Now, the president does, and this is in a realm, national security, where to arm a country or not arm a country is a very consequential decision. Now, I don't think the case for impeachment should hinge on the assumption that this particular policy is a good one. And that's where I wrote a piece about this in the Nonzero newsletter, which people can subscribe to by free. If you Google Nonzero one-word newsletter, you'll see that you can. And I think, by the way, Democrats, I think they're making a kind of mistake. I think it's unfortunate in many ways that this is turning into an argument that Trump's big crime was to betray the Ukrainians. I think the case for impeachment should be independent of the specific policy. That was effective, and should be about the fact that he subordinated an important kind of policy, national security policy, like arming a country or not, to a quest for personal political gain. Okay. That's the case for impeachment, is that, the president has the discretion to hold up an arms delivery, but the idea behind giving him that discretion is not that he's supposed to use that as leverage to help find dirt on a political opponent or in any other way. You're
not saying he violated somehow the statute, because as Alan Tonelson points out in this long article, which was still available on the web, there was only one due date given in the legislation, which he met, end of the fiscal year. He delivered the day.
Oh, wait, Mickey. Wait, whoa.
Two,
Mickey, hang on. We have to clarify this. No, Mickey, we have to clarify this. He only delivered the aid once it became a scandal, and he knew that Congress knew that he was withholding it. So that's 100%. I mean, yeah, technically he did deliver the aid, but don't act as if he was not withholding it.
It's such a weak violation of Congress's intent that they have a whole system whereby you notify Congress if you're going to delay the aid. He complied with that system, a little late, but he complied with that system. He notified Congress, and it's not impeachable if he notifies Congress after Congress somehow finds out. He notified them, and he delivered the aid. So he didn't violate the statute. Now, you're saying that he
violated his sacred damn duty, yeah.
His sacred duty to arm Ukraine?
Sacred damn duty. Mickey, I've already made clear this shouldn't be about arming Ukraine. His duty to discharge policy in accordance with, congressional intent and the whole idea behind the legislation, with the exception of cases where he can cite some overriding national interest, something that's in the public interest. Not a matter of personal political gain.
You're weighing he has to give a reason for the delay that is sufficient in your standards to justify the delay. Presidents have a lot of foreign policy authority. They implement things all the time with a quid pro quo or with leaning on people. That's foreign policy. And you're saying that this. I mean, I can see that some quid pro quos would be illegitimate. If he said, give me $20 million, that would be illegitimate. If he said, kill this person who is a dissident, that would be illegitimate. He said, kill this person who's not a dissident, maybe that would be illegitimate. This was investigate somebody who he thinks is corrupt, who the whole thing reeks of corruption. It's certainly in our national interest to find out if our former vice president was corrupt. And it doesn't matter if he's Trump's political opponent.
Do you think for a second
of the United States?
Do you think for a second that Trump's motivation was the national interest as opposed to his own political interest?
I don't care what his motivation is. This doesn't turn on his motivation. If he killed this ISIS guy and all he thought of was, gee, this is going to help me get elected, I don't care. If he thinks, gee, this is going to get me laid, I don't care.
Wait. No, those are two different things. Wait. Mickey, those are... Wait, hold on. Mickey, you're saying if he kills the ISIS guy to get laid, that's okay?
Yes. What matters is what he did. He killed the guy who was in the national interest. Intent is always... It's a lawyer's way of screwing everything up. Intent is always mixed. You always do intent for 3 or 4 different reasons, including getting laid, including getting reelected, including doing good for the nation.
Well, they're
mixed up. And you can't... If you can have a rule that does not require the divination of intent...
It's an easier rule to enforce, granted, but there are cases in the law where intent matters, obviously.
Right. But I don't think impeachment should be one of them.
Well, you don't. But
in this case, when his intent, he probably, in his egomaniacal way, was totally convinced that Biden was guilty, and even more implausibly, totally convinced that the DNC computer was in Ukraine. If you gear it on intent, you're going to lose because he sincerely thought that these things were...
First of all, you're conflating...
You have to prove objectively that no rational person could think that Biden was corrupt. And you can't meet this.
No. You're conflating two things. You're conflating the question of whether he thought Biden was guilty with the question of what his intent was, why he wanted Biden investigated. There's tons of people who are guilty of things, and the president has the power to get a lot of them investigated. The question is, why did he focus on Biden? I don't think you're denying that ultimately the motivation was personal political gain. And as for your claim that motivation, intent shouldn't matter in impeachment, is there anybody aside from you, like, is there a higher legal authority than you that has asserted that? Like, say, a court or what? I mean, what great legal thinker agrees with you? What great legal thinker agrees with you on this question that intent should not matter in impeachment?
There's a famous screed by Scalia against intent. I don't know how authoritative it is.
It's about impeachment?
It's probably not about it. There are not many impeachment cases come up.
Okay, well, that's what I'm asking for.
Impeachment it's an open field. There are no rules. Whatever Congress makes of it. So my rules are as good as your rules. And if my rules win more votes than your rules, I win. If your rules win more votes than mine, you win. It has nothing to do with Supreme Court precedent.
Well, then why should we argue about this? You're just saying that
I think an intent standard is silly. It's unworkable, and they should look at what he did. It was standard. It was political hardball, to use Chris Matthews' phrase.
Mickey,
to do a legitimate corruption issue that happened to kneecap your main opponent.
Mickey, political hardball is not in and of itself impeachable. Like if he has his campaign go look for dirt on all of his opponents, that's fine. That's legal. That's what campaigns do. The problem here is the mixture between his implementation of policy and his personal political interests. You get that, right? I'm not complaining about digging up dirt. But I'm complaining about subordinating congressionally mandated policy that the president signed on to the digging up of dirt.
People sign laws all the time because of political reasons, because it'll put their opponents in a bad light. That's just our system of government. Is you mix those two motives, and we want them to mix those two motives because we want presidents to do what the people want them to do. So, if Trump
didn't want this. I mean,
if Trump lowered the Medicare age to 59 because it would screw the Democrats and get himself reelected, that's a great thing. The fact that he had this evil intent does not does not make it impeachable because he was doing it to screw the Democrats.
Mickey,
look at what he did.
A, the people weren't clamoring for this, and B, you act as if the political efficacy of this maneuver depended on Biden actually being guilty. No, obviously, if there's an investigation in progress that he can point to during the presidential campaign, that helps him, right? And if he can say even the Ukrainian officials are looking into the 2016 blah, 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 that helps him politically. So don't act like this is only going to work for him politically if Biden is indeed guilty of something. And by the way, what evidence is there that Biden's guilty of something?
Well, okay. Well, the Biden's son got a huge sum of money, like $50,000 to $100,000 a month, to be on the board of this energy company, which everybody seems to concede is corrupt. Okay,
right, and they obviously were hoping to buy influence. I don't deny that.
Right, okay, and Biden in the past has done favors for his son. In the Washington Examiner, they came up with a couple of cases where he intervened in a regulation of the background checks of chemical security officers, okay? Because his son was lobbying for the chemical industry. This is not something that Biden would ordinarily care about. This is corrupt. This is him doing a favor for his son who got paid to induce the favor from the sitting vice president. So if he does it for the chemical industry, maybe he's also going to do it for Burisma when the vice president was the point man on Ukraine. It's reeks of corruption, and you would want to look into it if you were a prosecutor.
Oh, okay. But you know the standard objections, right? I mean, that the policy, a couple of things. Apparently, the investigation of Burisma that had once been pursued by the prosecutor who was ultimately axed at Biden's behest was dormant. The investigation wasn't going on.
I'm not claiming that.
Okay. B, but it's not like in getting rid of this guy, they ended investigation. B, apparently all countries in the West virtually were calling for the same thing. And C, the U.S. policy, it was not Biden freelancing. It was reached via an interagency process, and everybody was on the same page, apparently, in the administration and among allies. They all wanted this guy gone.
I'm not saying getting rid of that one prosecutor was the corrupt act.
Oh, so what is the corrupt act?
We don't know. The whole thing reeks of corruption. It's unprecedented. The vice president's son is getting paid. What's he getting paid for? A prosecutor would want to know. That itself is enough predicate.
Oh, I know what he was getting paid for. He was getting paid in the hope that he could somehow get Biden to do something or other. And companies do it all the time. Companies throw money around this way all the time, but you've got to have a plausible story about how they got something for their money.
What was that last bit?
I said you need a plausible. If you're saying, okay, well, it wasn't getting rid of the prosecutor, it would help if you could at least have something that Biden did do or was involved in that was the plausibly corrupt act.
Well, subpoena every email that Hunter Biden sent to his father and every form of communication, and then we'll find out. And maybe there's nothing there, in which case he's exonerated. This is totally smelly. You don't need anything more, I don't think. Especially if it's a foreign country and our rules of evidence don't apply. So let him at him.
Well, I think you do need something more. Let me make. I just think, again, it's clear that Trump was just trying to damage a political. You don't deny that, right? Trump's motivation was to damage a political opponent. First of all, you're not denying it.
I'm sure that's one of his motivations. Yeah, we had mixed motivations, Bob.
What would the other one be?
The other would be that he really thinks it's corrupt.
Oh yeah. Trump, motivated by like the pursuit of actual abstract good.
And the other thing is he hates Ukraine.
Well, okay, now you're talking. But this isn't really particularly a way to get back at Ukraine. I have another kind of argument to make about this, but I have a question about your interpretation. There's something I don't totally understand, and you may know more. So, this Ambassador Yovanovitch, this woman who testified a couple of days ago, who, Trump clearly kind of engineered a kind of, I don't know if smear campaign is too much, but, generated a lot of negative publicity about her, fired her, which he has the power to do, raising the question of why he had to do the smearing. I generally don't quite understand that. But the main thing I don't understand is, it seems like the initial initiative to get rid of her came from these Ukrainian cronies of Giuliani's. Is that your sense? That is my sense, and I don't quite know why she was screwing them up. Well, she is apparently ardently anti-corruption. She really is, and they were, I think, corrupt. I mean, they're hanging out with Giuliani. It's so
that isn't inherently corrupt.
No, but he doesn't exactly choose his friends in accordance with the highest standards. So anyway, but if that's the case, if they're the ones who wanted her out, and there's some reason to believe that it started that way, and then Giuliani wanted to convince Trump to get. I mean, is that where the motivation comes from? Then they had to convince Trump, or did Trump have his own reason initially to want her? It's confusing.
I agree, but obviously she's somebody who would oppose investigating Biden, so he wants her gone, right?
Why would she oppose investigating Biden?
Because she seems like a totally straight-laced, woman who.
So you agree do you agree that a morally upright person would oppose the investigation of Biden? Then
it's more than morally upright. A adamantly pro-Ukraine person who wouldn't want anything to ever delay aid to Ukraine because it's the most important thing in the world, who is a stickler for the rules and hangs out with all the people who think Ukraine is the most important issue in the world and has gone a little native maybe, would object to it because it's delaying aid to Ukraine. And also because, she like a lot of people, she thinks it smells of politics and she's above politics. And, it's investigating it. A lot of this is motivated by politicians who don't want anybody attacking them. So if you have a rule that you can never start an investigation against a politician, that's good for politicians. So they love that rule. They also don't like negative ads because negative ads hurt them. So they would ban negative ads if it were constitutional. The idea that you could never encourage a foreign government to investigate an American citizen or a political opponent is insane. Of course you can. Yeah,
you can if you actually have the national interest at heart. You're entitled to do that.
You're like a Hollywood person. What matters is your feelings. Is your heart in the right place? No, that's not what matters. You're not an actor. What matters is what you do, I think.
Well, you're saying it would be better if the law were like that. Hey, the law is not like that. As you know, intent is factored in all the time.
There is no law on what's an impeachable offense.
No, exactly. And Congress has broad authority. Right. And in exercising it, they are entitled to emulate the courts of law in the sense of taking into account.
Not. They shouldn't penalize you because you have bad feelings, bad intent.
No, it's not the bad feelings. It's what your intent says about the reason you derailed a policy that had been arrived at via the constitutionally ordained way of Congress approving it and you signing the bill.
This is your standard. You have put the what Congress wanted and what you signed behind this reason, which we think is inferior. Every president in history would have been impeached.
Why? I mean, what acts are analogous to this one?
Every time somebody does something for a selfish political reason, the opposition party is entitled to try to impeach him because that doesn't compare with our noble interest in enacting this law.
No, but again, there's a difference. I mean, if you pursue a policy that like all the politicians all the time pursue policies that they're not sure are a good idea, but they think are popular. Well, that's just a form of democracy working. They're appeasing popular demand. The public wasn't clamoring for some long shot investigation.
Why isn't declaring that the West Bank settlements are legal impeachable then? Because it's craven politics, pandering to a certain voting bloc, and so hey,
well, that's a voting bloc. That's a voting bloc. That's my point. I mean, I'm all for adding that to the bill of impeachment, but but sure, they try to appease specific constituencies all the time as well.
Well, now you're saying that you Bob Wright have decided what is too political. It's okay to appeal to a voting bloc, but it's not okay to show that your opponent is corrupt or to cast your opponent in a bad light. Well, who says that?
No, that's okay too. It's just that you're not allowed to use instruments of U.S. policy to get that done. You can't use the government to dig up the dirt. You can't like you would agree, I assume, that if a president let me just say this. If the president directed the director of the FBI to investigate a political opponent, wouldn't you agree that that's impeachable? I would say that's impeachable because that's a perversion of the Justice Department for the sake of personal political gain.
And if the dirt is there, if Joe Biden had murdered somebody in Ukraine, Trump would be completely within his rights to tell Ukraine to go investigate the murder.
No, but there's always some chance that
whether there is dirt there, and also whether what the investigation will show is real dirt or fake dirt. And there's no evidence that Trump wanted them to fake something.
There's always chance that there's some dirt. I think the test has to be, of all of the places you could direct resources right now, investigatory resources, are you directing them toward the cases where there's the highest likelihood of actually finding a grave crime? And the Biden thing just doesn't pass that test. You can't even come up with a plausible corrupt act.
You get impeached if you don't pass the Bob Wright zero-based budgeting tests for optimal deployment of prosecutorial resources. Do we have is it like affirmative action, where if the ratio of the cases you pursue is not in direct proportion to the ratio of all offenses, did you get impeached because you're focusing too much on one area? Can't do that.
No, let me be clear, since apparently I've failed to communicate successfully. If you do something that is in your own political interest, and launch an investigation, use government resources in some sense to launch an investigation of someone that's clearly in your own political interests, and the evident grounds for investigation are not really, as solid as a bunch of other things you could be deploying those resources to investigate, then no, that's bad. Yeah, that's bad. That does not pass the Bob Wright test. That's right.
The Bob Wright test leads Congress down a rabbit hole where they will always be comparing the value of prosecuting, how the potential legitimacy of prosecution to another, and we will always be impeaching. That's where ABI. What
it might do is lead presidents to err on the side of caution and be actually reluctant to deploy Justice Department resources to investigate political opponents. And I think actually most normal presidents actually follow that rule already, because they know it would look bad to people who
Yes, Trump's violated that rule. I don't think that's impeachable. You should be a little reluctant. On the other hand, since ex-office holders and Pauls are the greatest corruptors in the swamp, you can't let them off scot-free.
Let me ask you, okay, so you were drawn, your support for Trump derives from your views on immigration, and granted, he represents your views on immigration in a way that Hillary Clinton didn't.
My support of Trump was based on a large part of America was hurting, and it was hurting because of immigration and trade policies that nobody else was against. Trump was the only guy who on both those issues seemed to at least want to tilt the playing field against the people who had lost out the most in the previous 2 decades, whether the unskilled workers who's China and outsourcing and immigration put out of business. And so you had to sort of vote for him. Plus, he wanted to preserve Social Security, which was the only thing these people were clinging to. So that was good. Plus, he was relatively non-aggressive in the foreign policy area, non-interventionist. Another good point. So
in theory, although he has utterly failed to confront the foreign policy establishment in the end.
Well, but in practice, he hasn't started any wars. He's trying to get out of Syria. They're pulling him back in. But
actually, he's pretty close to starting a war with Iran. I mean, the backing out of the Iran deal was a catastrophically bad idea.
Well, let's see how the revolution that's currently
and are you happy with him declaring the settlements in the West Bank in compliance with international law?
I don't know about the Iran deal, but if the sanctions we've reimposed are tough enough so that there's a popular rebellion that overturns the Iranian government, which seems to be starting right now, that would sort of vindicate it. But
wait! That would vindicate it? So you think it's good that people seem to be about to die in Iran? That people are already let's be clear. People are already having trouble getting medical treatment. People are already dying because of the sanctions. And there's more and more economic suffering. And it may lead to rebellion in the streets. People will surely get killed. And you're saying that's vindication of Trump?
If it results in a democratic, friendlier government in Iran, yes. If it does,
how many deaths are justified? How many deaths are justified?
I don't know. That's one of those who do you throw out of the lifeboat questions that it's very hard to answer. But, if people in Iran want to revolt the way they did in Tiananmen Square, might be a good thing. It might be a futile thing that results in...
And do we have the right to subject nations to economic strangulation every time we think it would be good for people to revolt?
So you're against all sanctions? That was the argument.
Pretty much. I mean, unless they're multilateral, I'm against pretty much all unilateral sanctions,
people
yes.
Don't lose health care and die in hospitals if it's a multilateral sanction that's killing them?
I'm against pretty much all unilateral sanctions. Where have they done any good, Mickey? You keep hoping. You're saying this regime change effort will be different from all the others. It'll be great. When has it worked in the past?
I'm saying if it works, it works. It worked in South Africa.
Has it ever worked? Has it ever worked? Can you cite a single case?
South Africa.
Those were multilateral, and it wasn't. It wasn't even, that was not even the people rising up and revolting. That was like peer group pressure on South African elites.
Well, I think these sanctions are multilateral. They just don't have all the multilateralism that the previous ones did, but some people have gone with it. So
35 years ago, it worked. It's failed every time since. And you're all for trying it again, notwithstanding the number of people who die.
I don't understand
I thought Trump was against intervention, and you liked that. I thought Trump was against regime change, and you liked that.
If you say sanctions never work, then the alternative, the neocons will say, okay, well, let's have an invasion then. Let's have a war. Sanctions are killing people. That was one of the arguments for invading Iraq, was the sanctions were killing babies. So
hey, I've got an idea. You don't do the sanctions, plus you don't invade. How about that, Mickey?
Well, look, I'm playing more of a devil's advocate role here, but then the result is that the thing you want to oppose stays in place. So then Iran gets nuclear weapons.
First of all, Mickey, again, the nuclear deal was ensuring they would not get nuclear weapons. A.
20 years.
B. Is it our right to deny? I mean, our various allies. Israel, or allies at the time, Israel, India, Pakistan, we let them have nuclear weapons.
There have to be some cases like South Africa where you want to exert a lot of pressure to get a result you want. And if you're taking sanctions off the table,
it blows my mind. It blows my mind that you are defending Trump's Iran policy.
No, I don't.
It blows my mind.
I'm attacking your criticism of his Iran
Sounded
policy.
Like it.
I'm agnostic on his Iran policy. It might have been a really stupid idea. It is certainly in recent days looks pretty stupid. But I thought you said in recent days it's starting to look good because of the protests that you favor. 2 weeks ago it looked bad. Today it looks better. But I'm not a foreign policy guy. I don't.
Well, you said that one of the reasons you liked Trump was because of his foreign policy, and
he's relatively non-interventionist. He hasn't started any new wars yet. He wants to pull out of Afghanistan. He wants to pull out of Syria. The Syria thing is the most obvious one, where it was insane to have us go in, not to vanquish an enemy, but to somehow try to rejigger a post-war settlement with Assad that was more to our liking or not. We're terribly bad at that, and that's no reason to send troops. So
actually, it started out like Iran. I mean, some people were protesting, and we said, give them all they need to do the job. And we learned once again that however you try to do regime change, it's probably going to end badly.
Well, that was a mistake. I agree. Trump didn't do that. Obama did that.
Well, wait and see what happens if this goes on much longer in Iran. I mean, for sure Pompeo will be in favor of sending arms in.
It's entirely possible that if there were the Green versus Ayatollah election, that Pompeo would want to come out more forcefully in favor of the Greens. Yes.
Okay. Well, sorry if I got a little irate, but I'm shocked that you basically are defending the Iran policy, and I'm not
defending the Iran policy. I'm saying that if you take away sanctions and war, you don't have much influence.
You have to let countries be. What a horrible world where there wasn't a ton of killing, and you let them work out their own things, and probably eventually life would get better, which is better than hundreds of thousands of them dying, in my view.
I don't know what I think about that. But in general, the four things I cited, you were asking me why I supported Trump. Those are the four reasons. He's more or less kept his promise on all four. Plus his big appointments, Supreme Court and the Fed, have been okay. So I'm not incredibly opposed to Trump. I don't particularly look forward to 4 more years of him.
Okay, my question was going to be, but don't you for a lot of us, it's like just the day-to-day stuff Trump does that is so historically aberrant and I think cumulatively damaging. I'm just wondering, does that stuff ever make you go, he's with me on these policies, but still, I just wonder. And like the most recent one is, you've got this Jovanovich woman testifying in front of Congress, and he tweets in the middle of the testimony this like nonsensical tweet about she went to Somalia and it fell apart, right? Which is just like galactically stupid, first of all. But beyond that, apparently, yes, an attempt. Well, it could be taken as an attempt to intimidate witnesses. It's just got bad written all over it. Do things like this just not bother you?
No, they bother me. And I just said, I'm not sure I want 4 more years of this. I would trade Trump out for Josh Hawley in an instant if I could do that. But I can't. So it's going to be Trump versus some Democrat whose views I find really hard to swallow, especially on immigration, probably only on immigration. And so, sometimes life presents you with horrible choices.
So you'll vote for Trump?
I don't know. Why do you people are always trying to tell me that I'm more pro-Trump than I actually am.
So anyway, the question, another way of framing this question, at first when they were saying, well, we're going to call it bribery, I didn't even understand what they meant. I'm starting to see a kind of analog. Tell me what you would think of this. Like, suppose there's some bureaucrat and his job, he works in Medicaid, the Medicaid or food stamps distribution realm or something. And his job is to, when people say they didn't get their check, their reimbursement or whatever they were supposed to get, he is supposed to hear them out and either say, oh, you're right, here, we're sending it now, or not. He has the discretion depending on how, some woman calls him and says, I didn't get my check. You have the power to distribute it. He looks into it. He goes, oh, it looks like your check didn't get sent out. But he has the legal authority to withhold it further and investigate if he wants. And so he says to the woman, yeah, it's a shame you didn't get your check. I could sure use some sex, though. So in other words, it's not a bribe in the sense of money, but he gets a personal service that he finds gratifying for withholding money that he actually has the technical legal authority to withhold for now. Would you call that a crime?
Well, sure. Trump didn't get sex, though. He got an investigation of an arguably corrupt former.
He got something of personal political value.
It's all parasitic on whether you think the Biden investigation was justified. Everything depends on that. It's not a bribe if it's justified. If it's completely unjustified, then maybe he's getting something that he shouldn't get. Okay? But I think it's more than justified enough to make his asking for it not a high crime. If he did it in every country in the world, if he did it in 50 countries and said, you all got to investigate Joe Biden on flimsy grounds, impeach him. But this is one country where the deal stunk, and it was arguably a legitimate inquiry, and so it wasn't sex. It wasn't saying have sex with me.
Well, in a way, I don't see why you even say it matters whether the Biden investigation was plausible, because you don't think intent matters anyway. So you're not willing to let us stipulate that Trump did it out of that there's any personal political gain. In other words, you're not granting any possible analogy with any possible analog with the sexual favors part of my analogy. Because you're saying we can't talk about Trump's intent.
No, we can talk objectively about whether there were circumstances that justified an investigation.
Right, but that's different. Different.
It's like sex. If there is, it's not.
That's a different part of the analogy. That's the question of whether this guy in asking for sex, had any legitimate grounds for withholding the money further. But it doesn't speak.
It's whether the sex is sex, or if the guy, or the sex is something that the guy's entitled to. It's exactly that part of the analogy, I think.
No, it's not whether the sex is something. The guy's definitely not entitled to the sex.
It's the least helpful analogy in history.
I think it's an excellent analogy. I thought it up myself.
But it doesn't help your case.
I think it does. I think it does. Somebody. There. In other words,
for money.
In other words, there are legitimate grounds for withholding the money. It's just that they were not the motivation in this case. That's the analogy.
No, what he was asking for is either legitimate or not. It doesn't matter if the guy thinks I want sex because it'll enable me to be a better public servant. And
well, he could say that. He could say that. He could say that. He could say, I think the vibe around in this bureaucratic building I'm in would be a lot better if I could get some of this sexual frustration out. I mean, in other words, just as Trump can totally implausibly claim that no, there's this legitimate motivation for wanting this. That's how far-fetched Trump's claim is. That's how far-fetched your claim that we can't speculate about it. We can't infer that Trump's intention was personal political gain. Gosh, we just can't make such a wild leap of imagination.
It's not far-fetched. Hunter Biden's partners thought it was too smelly for him to take this job on the board. It was. State Department was worried about it. It was too smelly.
It was.
Biden's campaign was worried about it. It was too smelly because it was smelly.
It was smelly. For him to take the job was smelly.
But there was a legitimate reason. He could have just been showing the world that Ukraine had the support of a prominent United States person. It's very important to Ukraine to show that they have support from the United States. So there was
fine. Then it's 1% less smelly. I don't know what that. I don't know how it helps your case, but whatever. I guess our disagreement is reasonably clear. You spent a lot of time on Twitter critiquing my argument for impeachment on grounds that I think you now agree were based on.
Well, they're not. But the grounds that I thought I came to think you're making are not the grounds you're making now. Now, I thought you were saying that, Congress passed this law, so Trump had a duty to carry it out under the take care clause of the Constitution, that somehow he's violating his constitutional duty to enact what Congress had passed and he had signed. And you're not saying that. You're saying something else.
No, I'm saying there are legitimate grounds for withholding the funds. It's just that these were not them.
So So you've moved on.
Okay, so what else can we talk about?
Should we identify the whistleblower?
Oh, that's so ridiculous. Of course. No. You really think we should?
Yes.
To what end? The credibility of the whistleblower no longer matters. Everything he alleged has been corroborated.
It matters because he's part of this vast Ukrainian conspiracy that you oppose and that I oppose, that thinks arming Ukraine and overthrowing the government that was there is the most righteous cause ever. And that's what's behind Vindman and all these people who are horrified by Trump's phone call, when half of the people who heard the phone call were not horrified. They just thought it was a wasted opportunity. So if everybody who objected to it is part of this Ukrainian conspiracy, that to the average layperson lends some to the idea that maybe we shouldn't think that this was the most important thing in the world. Plus, the guy has ties to Biden. He worked for Biden.
Wait, we know that? You know who he is?
Well, if he's the guy who everybody thinks he is and the guy that the Washington Post is apparently writing about saying he is, yes. The Washington Post says he works for the CIA in a cubicle. This is what he did. They won't say, and also he has ties to Biden. Why not?
Well, how do you know he has ties to Biden?
Because everybody on the web says he does. I'm
out of the loop on this. My view is
the guy who's named, he worked for Biden. He didn't work for Biden on a campaign. He worked for Biden on the Ukraine issue because he's a Ukrainian, Bob.
Well, where I agree with you is that all of this is what I wrote my piece about in the newsletter is kind of that. All this, the part of the hearings that's about various people testifying that it's a betrayal of the Ukrainians and arming Ukraine is in the vital national interest. I don't buy that, and I don't like it. And that's why I made an argument that impeachment should be independent of the merits of this particular policy.
You forgot to tell Representative Schiff, who at every opportunity, including closing the hearing I just saw, says it's all about Ukraine and fighting Russia and then the noble cause of fighting Russia.
Well, Mickey, I didn't forget to tell him. I told him in that piece, I started the piece out quoting him and saying, this is the wrong way to talk, Adam Schiff. Okay. Now, he didn't listen to me, but that's what I did.
You got to DM him or send him an email or something.
I DM'd Jack. Wait, you want to get back to, Jack Dorsey follows me on Twitter. I DM'd him and complained about the verification thing.
No, you did it in public. He came out in public and said, gee, I don't know. It's taken a long time. But I'm joking.
No, he didn't say that about me, but go ahead.
Democrats are not doing what you want them to do. They're making it all about Ukraine and the.
I agree. That was why I wrote the piece. And yet you complained. Yeah, you complained about my piece.
No.
Even though I thought you would like 80% of my piece.
My point is that your grounds for wanting to impeach Trump, which is the invalidity of his reason for holding up, is so weak that you need the emotional rhetoric surrounding the Ukraine's noble fight against Russia to get it over to the public. That's why Schiff is doing it, because the alternative is to make your argument, which nobody will be convinced by.
I don't think it's weak. It's an abstract argument of principle, and those are always harder to sell to people. It's hard to sell arguments of principle to people. So the Democrats are trying to put flesh on this by talking about our Ukrainian brothers, and I'm against that rhetorical emphasis, and for reasons the article, by the way, is called Impeachment Should Be About America First, if people want to Google it, in the Nonzero newsletter, to which they can subscribe. But so yeah, we're kind of on the same page.
Well, but
but wait, I was going to say something else. What was I going to say?
Identifying the whistleblower here.
Identifying the whistleblower. Thank you. So that said, that it does kind of bother me how many people are, and I don't deny that a lot of these people, from Taylor to Vindman, are motivated to some extent by their belief in the policy itself, which isn't surprising. I don't indict them for that. It's just that to my mind is separate from the actual merits of a good argument for impeachment. So, so what is the point? You want to show that the whistleblower is another one of them, and then you can say, hey, the whole thing derives fundamentally from this. I mean, my view is, look, there's an argument for impeachment. You assess it. It doesn't matter what the motivation of the whistleblower was. We now have the facts, or will have many of them.
Well, but it has to be a high crime. So we're saying, yes, we have the facts. How important are they? And if the only people who think they're important are Ukrainians who are desperate to keep the aid flowing to Ukraine, that gives you some perspective on how important it really is. If the whistleblower is a Trump supporter who hates Ukraine but was nevertheless so horrified by the ethical violation on this call, that would lead people to think, well, maybe there is something to it. It's totally relevant.
Well, see, that's the thing that I don't think should be the case anyway. I mean, in an ideal world, you just evaluate the merits of the case. You don't go, wow, there were 7 outraged people in the Trump administration itself, so it must be a grave violation of principle.
But that's the way. I think that's the way humans.
Of course, and Congress is trying to sell it to the public. I don't deny that.
But here's a bad analogy. If it were a nuclear power plant and the public didn't really know whether this was a safety violation of the nuclear plant or not, if there were 7 nuclear experts from all parties who agreed that it was a safety violation, the public would say maybe it was. If all the nuclear experts are working for Joe Biden, they would say, hey, maybe this isn't such a big safety violation. The public has to grasp onto these.
Yeah, no, it is all relevant. Look, I agree that I agree that probably if you revealed the whistleblower's identity, it could wind up, as a rhetorical matter, in terms of the public's opinion, it could wind up damaging the Democrats' case a little. That wouldn't be on grounds of logical merit, but yeah, as a political matter, it might. So if that's what you want to do, then you should be in favor of it. But as a matter of principle, doesn't the whistleblower statute, isn't it supposed to keep whistleblowers generally concealed against unmasking, precisely so that future whistleblowers will not be deterred?
There is a general principle that whistleblowers shouldn't be protected, but the statute itself only applies to the Inspector General of the department that the whistleblower is in. It's mainly designed to prevent reprisals, not to keep him anonymous. As a friend of mine, Tim Noah, pointed out, if he was anonymous, you wouldn't have to protect him against reprisals. There is a guarantee of anonymity, but even that, it says the Inspector General can break the anonymity if it's unavoidable. Clearly, it's unavoidable in this case. And anyway, we're not the Inspector General. In Congress, they're not the Inspector General. The principle underlying this statute, which is whistleblowers generally should not be harassed and intimidated and should be protected, is I think, valid. And I also think the whistleblower has a legitimate security concern. Right. I propose a statesman-like solution, which is the press agree to report everything about the guy, including his ties to Biden, and just not use his name.
Well, that won't happen in the modern media environment, in the modern technological environment.
Everybody knows who this guy is. It's all a charade.
I don't.
You don't?
No.
You're not qualified to blogging head on blogging heads. I mean, you're obviously not paying enough attention to the web.
I shouldn't be fired. But
no, it's like it's a lot of people know about this, and I agree. There's some people who don't, and there's a security risk in broadcasting it to the whole world.
I mean, I don't have strong feelings.
I would be worried.
But I would say that if there is great political value for the Republicans in unmasking this guy, it will come from a connection which you say exists between him and Biden, not so much the Ukrainian stuff. I mean, if the Ukrainian stuff was a big deal, it would already be hurting the Democrats big time, and they might have had the wisdom not to make it such a big part of their narrative, right? I mean, the Democrats don't seem to think that pointing out that someone wanted to arm Ukraine undermines their credibility, because they are highlighting that aspect of all of their witnesses, right?
But that's because the public hasn't read your or mine broadsides against this Ukraine mindset, pro-Ukraine mindset. And maybe one day, if Vindman already seems a little bit of a fanatic. I mean, he was better today than I expected, but he can be characterized as totally as a pro-Ukraine fanatic. I mean, keep in mind his justification for being horrified, okay, wasn't that Biden was innocent. It was that if you went after Biden, that might jeopardize the bipartisan support for Ukraine aid, okay? That's an argument that applies even if Biden is guilty of sin. Democrats still might be pissed off. If you're going after him, that's the mindset of a total Ukrainian. Anything that undermines Democratic support for Ukraine can't be done, can't piss off the Democrats. So Trump was doing something that pissed off the Democrats, therefore was harming the national security interests. The man's whole worldview is warped.
I mean, first of all, I think the fact that if he did, I didn't listen to all the testimony, the fact that he doesn't say explicitly, and all of this for just for the pursuit of personal political gain doesn't mean he's not thinking that. I think all of these people are thinking that. I grant that they care very much about the other end of the story.
He emphasized even today, in his statement, he chose to emphasize it would destroy bipartisan support.
Well, that's his end of the expertise. That's what he's for. He's a national, he's on the National Security Council.
So even if Biden had murdered people, can't piss off the Democrats, can't investigate him.
Well, we don't. That's what you're conjecturing, and we don't know. But I don't. I mean, like, to get back to the very first thing I said, look, I think there's a pretty good chance that impeachment is just not a good political idea for the Democrats. I think it's not good for the country, which doesn't mean it's not valid. But and so it's not like I'm in that sense a big supporter of impeachment. And it's the whole thing is a foregone conclusion in terms of how it actually works out. He's going to be, he will not be convicted in the Senate. Trump will not be convicted in the Senate.
I don't think it's foregone.
Come on. How does he wind up getting convicted in the Senate? Now we should say we're taping this before the Sondland testimony. And there's some chance that Sondland will, not much, I think. But if Sondland tells everything he knows, it's kind of like Manafort and the Mueller investigation. If Manafort had told us everything he knows, the Mueller report might well have been more damning. He didn't. He chose to hold out for the pardon, which he'll probably get. If Sondland, I think, tells everything he knows, we will hear about we will have more direct evidence of Trump's involvement than we have so far, even though people like you and me, I think, rightly assume that we know the basic story already.
I think everybody knows the basic story. I think
Well, no, but the Republicans in Congress are like, this is hearsay. How many of you actually listened to the call?
That's stupid. But I think Peggy Noonan is right that it takes more than this Ukraine aid business to impeach him. If they need a couple more shoes to drop, then they might get a Senate vote. Plus, but keep in mind, most of the Republican senators hate Trump. Okay, if there was I believe Mike Murphy when he says if it were a secret ballot, he would be removed. Okay, so they just need an excuse.
No,
if they get an excuse, they're going to remove him. So
an excuse is not good enough. An excuse is not good enough. What has to happen for Trump to get convicted is that evidence has to come out that moves opinion among Republican voters enough so that Trump becomes like a big liability on the ticket in 2020 and sure to lose himself and sure to drag a bunch of senators down. Now, at that point, they might get together and say, look, we need 20 votes. There's a lot of you who aren't up for reelection in 2020, right? If we just dump Trump, we can get Mike Pence to run. He might actually win, and it'll be a much better world. And 2 years from now, the voters will forgive you because Pence will have continued to appoint Supreme Court justices and so on. That's the only way I see it happening.
If they could replace Pence, too, and get another Republican like Hawley or Cotton or even –
Tom Cotton. Mickey, would you vote for Tom Cotton? Oh.
Aside from foreign policy, I would. The foreign policy is pretty bad.
Oh, man.
But my point is, if they run Pence and there's no time for them, I'm assured there's not enough time to replace Pence. So if Trump goes, Pence is the nominee. That's a recipe for a huge defeat. For one thing, the Republican voters will be demoralized. They'll stay home. So Pence will lose. All the down ballot people will lose. It'll be a total wipeout. Pence is he's just not an inspiring figure for the Republican Party. I'm sorry. So
see, the funny thing about Pence is I have no idea what he's like. Has he ever opened his mouth? I mean, I know he has, and if I paid more attention, I'd have more of a sense for him. But the only time I ever see him is like with that solemn expression standing behind Trump. He doesn't really go off. He reads some speeches, but that's it, right?
He has some virtues. His main virtue is he's not strident. So and this came across in his debate with Kaine at the vice presidential debate. He seems like an ordinary guy. Like he proposed this ridiculous plan to let immigrants go home and touch base in their home country and then come back. Okay. And it was ridiculous. And if you said, Pence, this is ridiculous, he said, oh, well, it's just a proposal. I thought it was good. He's not a jerk about that. He seems like a reasonable person. So to that extent, that's his most appealing quality, I think. But he's a standard Republican. He thinks tax cuts are wildly important. He thinks fighting regulation is wildly important. Those are not my priorities. And they're not priorities of the majority of the country anymore.
Okay, but in the scenario I'm talking about where Trump sustains more damage and it gets to the point where he just can't win, even against, we should talk about the Democratic presidential candidates. Bruce. But Trump can't win. Then Pence will look better than Trump because Pence could win. And by the way, there's a lot of people who just couldn't vote for Trump. Well, there's some people who just couldn't vote for Trump who they look at Pence and go, he doesn't seem crazy. I guess he's better than Trump.
But they aren't the 30%.
The swing voters.
I mean, they aren't swing voters, and they aren't Trump's base. None of the people you talk to are in Trump's base. Gerald Ford, who replaced Nixon, is a much more plausible presidential candidate than Mike Pence, and he lost. So we'll get Pete Buttigieg, who is the Jimmy Carter of this race.
Oh, he's worse than that. He's the Mike Dukakis of this race. He's a combination of Adlai Stevenson and Mike Dukakis, not encouraging precedents.
Really? He's that bad? He's been quite eloquent in some debates.
I think Adlai Stevenson was eloquent, so far as I know. Dukakis was. It's true that he's not as nerdy seeming as Dukakis, but they're both kind of you get the point. I mean,
my friend Mike Hirschhorn thinks that he's the Macron of this field because he's a technocrat. he doesn't seem like a technocrat to me. But
let's talk about the Democratic presidential candidates. First of all, do you agree with me that? And look, this is like, I guess, a delicate thing to talk about. I think Joe Biden is suffering actual cognitive decline, and it's not. I don't mean it's like dementia level per se, but he's lost a whole lot. If you look at, he did really well in the 2012 debates. If you compare that to this and chart the 7-year decline, he will be appreciably worse a year from now when he would debate Trump. And look, we're all getting older. I can tell I'm getting slower. It happens. It's not a crime, but I think it's reached a point where it's a serious problem in him as a candidate. Do you agree?
Well, it's obviously a serious problem. It's hurting him. But I have this weird view with Biden has always been incoherent. He's always been a motor mouth.
Not like this.
He's always been uneloquent, which is why he's failed every time he's run for president. But he's an egomaniac who doesn't realize that he's not as smart as he thinks he is. If he did, he'd be much less of a threat. He's smart enough to be president. He's just not as smart as he thinks he is. He
used to be able to finish his sentences with more consistency.
He's actually more appealing now that he's a little cowed and a little like hesitant and more of an elder statesman and more gentle. And, I find him much more appealing now than when he was in his football prime.
If you're right, then he will beat Trump, because I definitely think Biden of 5 years ago could beat Trump right now.
Well, this is Biden, the elder statesman who will, return things to normal for 4 years while the country figures out what the hell is going on.
So rank the Democratic candidates in order of their likelihood of beating Trump.
I have an automotive analogy.
Okay.
Ford is coming out with this electric Mustang.
Yeah.
Okay,
and it's like an SUV-ish hatchbacky Mustang,
designed to look like a Mustang. But they were originally going to just do some half-ass thing, which they called a compliance car, which was an electric vehicle just designed to be good enough to satisfy the feds, so they could get their buyers, so they could get their mileage figures up, so they could sell some more pickup trucks. Okay, Joe Biden is the compliance car of American politics. He's just good enough to put off all decisions for 4 years, and if you want that, then you're for Joe Biden. Democrats want that.
Who is the electric Mustang SUV?
I think Elizabeth Warren still is the electric Mustang SUV.
That's a great bumper sticker.
I thought I like Cory Booker. I thought he was going to stage a comeback. He might still.
It's funny. I was just thinking, for foreign policy reasons, I've never been a Cory Booker fan, but I was just thinking, although he's not doing well at all, he's doing worse than I would have predicted among Democrats. I think he would kill Trump. I mean, him in the debates versus Trump is just, night and day. I mean, it's like he's articulate, he's upbeat, he's big, he's vigorous, He
can be spontaneously funny.
Yeah.
But he's present in the moment. He can react to whatever's happening around him. But he's been a little egomaniacal and phony in a way that this I am Spartacus stuff and taking extreme positions just to play to the crowd.
Well, Pete, you're right. Pete, you're right. People who don't like egomaniacal phonies will definitely prefer Trump to.
I'm just saying that Booker did not fulfill his true potential to be he's an authentic moderate. He's not a crazy person. He's the candidate of Wall Street. So if he'd just been authentically himself, he'd be much more appealing. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so what's your order of likelihood of beating Trump among all the candidates? Who should Trump most fear?
Why? I think Warren. Warren has a populist potential to steal a chunk of his voters, because his voters are working class voters who care about economics. And if Warren can convince them that she's going to be better for them economically and is sane, she has, and this is not, I think smart consultants will tell you this too. She's not too far to the left to do that.
I think Bernie would do well were it not for the one thing, which is that they can honestly say about him, he will make you surrender your existing health insurance plan for a plan that is, so far as you know, untested. I think that's death. Aside from that, I think he'd be a very strong candidate.
I just think he's a crazy old leftist. Why not get the same thing with Elizabeth Warren, who's not a crazy old leftist?
I'm just saying I think he would do well. I think we don't know how. No woman has ever been elected president. We don't know what the electorate is and isn't ready for. There are definitely some women they're ready for, I'm sure. Is Elizabeth Warren one of them? I don't know. And I'd say the same thing about Pete Buttigieg. I hope we're living at a time when a gay person has as good a chance as the next person of getting elected. I'm far from convinced that that's the case. I don't know. It's an untested proposition.
We know from Hillary's popular vote that people are willing to vote for a woman.
Yeah, but she's a very different person from Elizabeth Warren.
Yes, less appealing.
Well, to some, but other people don't find her as scary. Big money doesn't find her as scary, and you can bet they'll have their say. But anyway.
So I don't know. I'm who else is there?
Kamala Harris, but she had her day and it faded. I don't know. Well, the people keep saying Klobuchar, but she doesn't.
People think there's plenty of time to have a comeback, a surge in Iowa. People are expecting a Klobuchar surge in Iowa. So that could happen.
Yeah.
And who else is there? Yang, no.
Can you explain the logic of UBI to me, Universal Basic Income?
Yes.
I mean.
We're going to lose all our jobs to robots, and we don't want to starve.
Okay, fine. Then you have a redistributive policy. You give money to people who lose their jobs. You give money to low-income people. Why go through with this pretense that you're actually giving money to everyone, since some of the people you give it to, you're going to have to take away more from in order to pay for the whole program? It's just a ridiculous – it's a crazy – I mean, a very small percentage of the population is going to be victimized by automation. So what? We give $12,000 a year to all of them?
They're true. It's the same logic behind the George McGovern. It in fact is the George McGovern $1,000.
But that was $1,000 a year, I think. Anyway, but that was
right,
real money.
It has become a month. Yeah. It hides the marginal tax rate concern, which is, if you take away as incomes rise, then you're imposing a marginal tax rate. If you give it to everybody, then it looks like you're not imposing a marginal tax rate.
Yeah, but it's bullshit. You are. I mean, you have to.
It's portable because then you have to tax it away anyway.
Right.
But it hides that. And also there's the logic of Social Security, which is that somehow, which I don't buy, universal programs are more appealing than means-tested programs. So we give Social Security everywhere, everybody. It's popular. And in fact, Social Security was popular and Social Security wasn't means-tested. So
okay.
I think it's the logic of Social Security that he's trying to appeal to.
Okay. Final UBI question. There's like two versions of it. The libertarian version is you strip away all the social safety nets. So they no longer get Medicaid. They no longer get food stamps. You just give them $12,000 a year or maybe more, but you give them some fixed amount. Government shouldn't be paternalistic and direct the way people spend their money, blah, blah, blah. And then there's no, they keep the safety net. We just give them some money and we give everybody some money. I don't even know which version is Yang's.
I don't know, but the libertarian version isn't going to happen. So,
but I'm wondering what motivates him. I like him. He's an appealing guy. I think
he's a very appealing guy. And he's
although you know what, he had agreed to do blogging heads back when he was a nobody. And then he started picking up steam and they said, we have to they canceled me for like some CNN gig or something back in the early days of his momentum building.
He probably has a blue check mark too.
He probably does. I mean, they said, let's reschedule, but I have my pride. I was like, screw you. Screw the Yang gang.
No, you have to grovel.
Now, look, it wouldn't have worked out. He was picking up momentum. It would have been eternal rescheduling. We're never good enough for the Yang gang,
What kind of booker are you? Okay. I have one more topic to talk about. How long have we gone?
Well, more than it's hard to keep track because let's give them a peek behind the curtain, Mickey. You had some technical issues early on. Right. And so that delayed. So I don't know when we actually started. We're going to start at 5. I think it was probably past 5:30 and now it's 6:51. We're definitely over an hour, but nobody's listening at this point anyway. Let's just talk. What do you want to talk about?
Also, Joe Rogan has shown you can go for 8 hours if you're Joe Rogan.
People often compare me to Joe Rogan.
I don't want to pursue that, but I do want to pursue. There's one Epstein wrinkle.
Let's talk about Epstein.
Here's the thing.
Let me predict. You're going to claim there's more evidence that he was murdered in prison, and I'm going to turn the tables on you and show that the evidence actually makes it less likely that he was murdered in prison. Go ahead.
That's probably what's going to happen. But there is this meme, Epstein didn't kill himself, and people are starting to say, oh, the evidence is one way or the other. It doesn't really matter. I want to solve the main Epstein scandal, which is where did he get his money, not who killed him. But there is this fact that people don't know about the situation in that prison, which is it's run at the ground level by a prison gang of inmates. Okay, it's not run by the feds. In every prison, there's the official authority and the de facto on the ground who's actually running things, and it's run by this gang. Okay, so
who's the gang? What's the gang? It's not the Yang gang, right?
Not the Yang gang. I'm not going to say what gang it is because I'm so like El Chapo was scared of this gang. Okay, everybody's scared of this gang, so I ain't going to put myself in
wisely.
They might figure out where my undisclosed location is. But anyway, so this gang is perfectly capable of telling the guards, okay, take a nap. We're going to go in and do something to this fellow Epstein. You didn't see us, okay? That's on the ground possible. It raises the likelihood that he didn't kill himself, but it's not for sure. Okay, these guards who are now being prosecuted, ideally you would want the feds to turn the tables on them, and they say, okay, we're going to throw the book at you unless you tell us what really went on, okay? So they're going to turn the tables on them by throwing them back into the same prison that's run by the gang who they would be turning the tables on, okay? That's not going to happen. That's not going to get the story out.
Wait, I don't see what you mean. They're going to threaten them with prison time in the prison where they would get killed if they spill the beans?
Yes, so they're not going to
Well, then they'll spill the beans and not go to the prison.
Because I think the idea is that they send them to the prison to soften them up, and then they will spill the beans because they can't stand being in prison. But
well, I'm sure if they really want the beans, they can work that out and not put them in the prison.
They've screwed up everything. I mean, you would think they would manage to keep the most prominent prisoner in America alive, but they screwed that up, and I think they're going to screw this up.
That's why my version of the conspiracy theory is just that somebody said, hey, he's tried to commit suicide once. Let's don't check up on him too often. Should he choose to try again, that would be okay with us. I think that may well have happened. But here's what I read kind of fleetingly, but I think I got the story right, that some of the evidence on which these guards are being prosecuted, and by the way, the charge is they were supposed to check on him every half an hour. They didn't. But apparently some of the evidence that they didn't involves video footage showing that nobody visited his cell for like 5 hours. Right? Apparently, according to this story, I gather they do have video footage that would note that would record whenever anyone visited his cell or not.
I didn't know that. I thought the video mysteriously malfunctioned. That's one of the big pieces of evidence.
There was a story to that effect weeks ago, but the latest story I thought was that
very interesting. Could you send me that story? I'd never heard that before.
If I can find it again. It was how the web is.
I mean, right after he killed himself, Preet Bharara, I may be mispronouncing his name, said, "Oh well, I'll have a video of everything. We'll find this out quickly because we have these cameras that are triggered by motion." But then it turned out predictably that the video cameras malfunctioned. So that's one of the big coincidences that leads people to think he didn't kill himself. But he may have killed himself. He may not have killed himself. There's still a big mystery. And the other piece of evidence that came out is a woman testified that there was a room in his house which had cameras on all the bedrooms and all the bathrooms,
right,
videotaping all the shenanigans that were going on. And he had people monitoring those cameras, okay? So that means there's a whole bunch more witnesses that we didn't know about. It seems insane that he would have people monitoring the cameras because those are all people who might testify against him in the future. But apparently he did.
And your theory remains that he was a honey trap for the Mossad?
No, I don't know. That's one of the main theories. I think, probably the answer is all of the above. He laundered money. He blackmailed people. He tried to protect himself by offering himself as an intelligence asset. It is weird that the two politicians mentioned as having sampled the honey trap are Bill Clinton and George Mitchell, later appointed the Mideast envoy. If you were the Mossad, those are two people you'd really want.
The piece you should write is connecting the Mossad honey trap theory to Trump's deeming the Israeli settlements not in violation of international law. That piece is waiting to be written, Mickey.
I mean,
they got something. Yeah, this is the piece. I recommend that you write it, not me. They've got footage of Trump, and they're using it to get him to do something, of course, he ordinarily wouldn't do, which is something reprehensible.
He doesn't have a history of going out with underage girls. So if it was just a video of him.
Wait a second. He made a point of walking into the locker room of the Miss Teen USA pageant or universe or something, right? Teens. He didn't have to do that. There was a sign on the door, dressing room.
It's a good point.
Thank you.
But
why don't you make concessions like this when we're talking about Trump or Iran? We are talking about Trump. Never mind.
If I owned the Miss Teen USA pageant, I would be sorely tempted to do the same thing.
Mickey, I am, as your guidance counselor, I'm suggesting you say that you were just kidding.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
And I would not do it.
No, you wouldn't actually do it. That's true.
I've actually, anyway.
I would stop right here. That sounded like that word was going to be actually, and I'm not sure you want to talk about something you've actually done.
I do not identify with Humbert.
Who is Humbert?
The hero of
Of what?
Lolita.
Oh, Lolita. Oh, yeah. I think in the current era. Oh, by the way, last thing I want to say. I was about to say in the current Me Too era, I recommend you like STFU right now. But the segue of Me Too is to my contrarian view that the morning show on Apple TV Plus is actually not bad. That's my contrarian view. It's actually not bad.
I didn't understand the critique of it. The critique of it was it only gets good after 4 episodes. Well, hey, if it gets good after 4 episodes...
It gets good sooner than that.
Yeah.
Well, they'd only released 4, so that was actually a damning indictment at the time. But now there's more. But it gets interesting. It's not that bad in the first one, but by the second one, you're pretty drawn in, I would say. Well, it's pretty good.
It has America's Greatest Actor in it, so...
Who is America's Greatest Actor?
Billy Crudup.
He's good. His character's good. I'll tell you, they're all damn good. Reese Witherspoon is good. Jennifer Aniston is good.
I always have fantasies of Hollywood executives, because Billy Crudup has never been a star, say, what is it about Mr. that's holding him back? Is there something about Mr. Crudup we could change, maybe, to put him to the public? When
I heard that last name, I thought, did you get a lot of guidance on the selection? Maybe it's his actual name.
I saw him in a production of Arcadia where he was playing a Hugh Grant Brit with a British accent. He was fantastic.
No, he's good. He was in Almost Famous. He was the rock star.
Yeah, he's good in everything he's in. My recommendation is Rob Long's article in Commentary. It's behind a paywall, but maybe you have some free articles on Commentary left for you.
I'm sure I do.
I think you do. On the coming crash at Intersectionality Intersection. It is sort of similar to Megan Downs' book. It's like arguing that, the big one is RuPaul is going to get, has already been criticized by PC forces. But at some point, according to Rob, people are going to realize that drag is really blackface for women. In other words, he's mocking femininity in the same way that racist blackface mocks black traits. And they're going to try to put RuPaul out of business. So it's going to be the drag queens versus the feminists. Who's going to win that? I don't know. There's already a fight between the trans people and feminists who oppose the trans people called TERFs. So they're having a war. It's not all peaceful on the intersectionality front, and it's also Rob Long at his best. It's a hilariously written article. So,
sounds like I'll have to read it to pass judgment on it. I mean, Andrew Sullivan has weighed in on this, but not from an intersectional perspective.
Well, it's similar to Andrew Sullivan weighing in will be an example of the things that Rob is talking about.
Well, yeah, but that's not intersectional because Andrew's not an intersectionalist. So that tension, I mean, he has
no, but it's
has been less than warmly embracing of the trans movement, I think. But that's from a gay perspective of a certain kind and not necessarily an intersectionalist.
I haven't read Andrew's article, but it's gays versus trans. That's.
I don't know. I haven't. I'm not that conversant.
I want to recommend Megan Down's book, which should have been called "Woke Me When It's Over," but they wouldn't let her use that title, so now it's called "The Problem with Everything." Why not just call it "Don't Buy This Book"? But I want to apologize to her because she's on our site talking about that, and we briefly had the name Megan spelled wrong. It's happen often. Reading the book, and it's of course a delight to read, and I'm learning all sorts of things. And so and it should be called "Woke Me When It's Over." That's his thesis, "Woke Me When It's Over." So
then that title's unused, and you can use it. Are you writing a book? Are you working on a book?
No, I think everybody should just start calling it "Woke Me When It's Over," and eventually they'll be forced to change the title to what it's informally known as.
Okay, I'm on board.
Okay.
Hashtag they should call it "Woke Me When It's Over." I'm there.
You had a whole Bloggyheads interview with her?
I didn't. No. I think Dan Kaufman did.
Okay.
Unless he pronounced it Kaufman. You know, you ask people how they pronounce their names, and you never remember. You never remember.
Sometimes they're mnemonic devices.
Yeah. I don't know what it would be in this case.
I forget what they are.
Cough. Well, like it would be cough related. So, okay. Anything else? I mean, this is Joe Rogan territory. It's pretty safe to say nobody's listening.
But people listen to Joe Rogan. No, we've gone through all my lists.
Oh, you had an actual list. I didn't. I didn't. Your brother emailed me and wanted me to ask you a question about Trump, but I don't think I want to give him positive reinforcement.
Always a bad thing.
Also, can't you and your brother just talk to each other?
Yeah, he DMs me.
Yeah, he sent me the DMs and asked me to ask you the DMs.
He's a judge, so he can't.
Oh, he's an actual judge now? I should treat him with more respect. Okay, then in that case, I'll ask you. I mean, isn't Trump abusing the executive privilege claim? That's his question. You can just say no.
What do I know about executive privilege? It's one of the most boring subjects in the world is the executive claims executive privilege. Congress tries to subpoena them. It's like, is there a quid pro quo? It's like your eyes glaze over.
So you consider it a valid, an effective refutation of a legal argument to say that's too boring?
No, I'm saying every president has had an executive privilege fight with Congress, including Obama, and it's nothing to impeach somebody for. The courts will hash it out. If he defies the courts, if Trump defies a decision by the Supreme Court, then we can impeach him.
So should we have like a code word so that people who made it all the way to the end, if they want to put the code word in the comments, either on Blogging Heads TV or on the YouTube Blogging Heads TV channel, they can use the code word?
We've tried that before.
I know, and it works. It worked. But now we're really taxing their patience because now it's almost 2 hours, I think.
Humbert.
And that's Humbert. Correct.
They only have to do one Humbert. They don't have to do both Humbert.
Right, because, because Lolita in the current era is kind of a dicey thing. They might not want to identify themselves with a novel.
There are not too many other Humberts, but okay.
Well, no, but there was Engelbert Humperdinck, and people could think that that's who they meant. You remember him? That was a great stage name. Beats the hell out of Billy Crudup.
Engelbert Humperdinck was a famous composer. He was borrowing the name of a. Oh,
was he?
Yeah.
So the pop singer Engelbert Humperdinck stole that name. That name.
Correct.
Wow. And then how about Tom Jones? Because I used to get them mixed up.
I don't know what Tom Jones's real name is. It's a little like these people who named their dog Gertrude Himmelfarb because they thought it was like a hilarious name.
And then they realized there really was one. I met Gertrude Himmelfarb once.
She's supposed to be very nice. And one day
She's
they
very
were
nice.
Bay Crystal, Irving
Yep.
Crystal's wife,
Yep.
and they said, and this is our dog, Gertrude Himmelfarb. And they didn't realize that they were talking to Gertrude Himmelfarb.
Oh, come on. That didn't really happen.
I think it did really happen.
Ah.
Anyway, I was told it really happened. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, Boomer.
Anyway, next time we will unwrap the Tucker Carlson T-shirt.
Go ahead. Rip it out. Let's go.
Really?
Unboxing. This is like millions of views on YouTube. If you're the first to unbox something,
I'm not. I'm not the
YouTube
first.
magic.
I was at this. I'm taking it out of the package now.
Yeah.
At this thing, Politicon, and I saw people wearing this shirt
that is one fetching shirt.
It has Tucker Carlson's visage all
In fact,
over.
I'd like to have a dog fetch it.
In various stages of life. It has the young Tucker with the bow tie.
Oh.
The informal Tucker with the unbuttoned preppy shirt.
Mm.
And it has the later Tucker. And I think I may wear this to sleep, Bob. This may
when are you planning to wear that? Oh, sleep. You just
never. I was never set on.
Okay. So look, we've gone on
fetching, as you can see.
We've gone on so long since we issued the code word that we should issue a new code word to make sure they make it the exact end.
That'll be too confusing.
It is Tucker Humbert. Okay. Tucker Humbert.
That's like he could sue for libel. For that.
Bring it on.
Okay.
Bring it on.
Okay.
Thanks, Mickey. Sorry, I think I yelled at you too loud during the Iran part, but not during the rest, I think.
You were fine. You were very mindful. Total mindfulness.
Shut up.
Okay.
That's quite a burden to carry through life, people expecting you to be mindful.
Lived up to it.
Yeah, okay. See you.
Okay. See you.
Bye.